Listen and relax. Crafting serenity, one audiobook at a time.
And Lucy and I walking by the cliff path and joining her at the gate. I felt a little sad myself, for I could not feel but how absolutely happy it would have been had Jonathan been with me. But there I must only be patient. In the evening we strolled in the casino terrace and heard some good music by Spore and Mackenzie and went to bed early. Lucy seemed more restful than she has been for some time and fell asleep at once. I shall lock the door and secure the key the same as before, though I do not expect any trouble tonight. 12th of August. My expectations were wrong, for twice during the night I was wakened by Lucy trying to get out. She seemed even in her sleep to be a little impatient at finding the door shut, and went back to bed under a sort of protest. I woke with the dawn and heard the birds chirping out of the window. Lucy woke too, and I was glad to see was even better than on the previous morning. All of her old gaiety of manner seemed to have come back. She came and snuggled in beside me, told me all about Arthur. I told her how anxious I was about Jonathan, and she tried to comfort me. Well, she succeeded somewhat, for though sympathy can't alter facts, it can help to make them more bearable. 13th of August. Another quiet day, and to bed with the key on my wrist as before. Again I woke in the night and found Lucy sitting up in bed, still asleep, pointing to the window. I got up quietly and, pulling aside the blind, looked out. It was brilliant moonlight, and the soft effect of the light over the sea and sky merged together in one great silent mystery. It was beautiful beyond words. Between me and the moonlight flitted a great bat, coming and going in great whirling circles. Once or twice it came quite close, but was, I suppose, frightened at seeing me, and flitted away across the harbour towards the Abbey. When I came back from the window, Lucy had lain down again and was sleeping peacefully. She did not stir again all night. 14th of August. On the East Cliff, reading and writing all day, Lucy seems to have become as much in love with the spot as I am, and it is hard to get her away from it when it is time to come home for lunch or tea or dinner. This afternoon she made a funny remark. We were coming home for dinner and just come to the top of the steps up from the West Pier and stopped to look at the view, as we generally do. The setting sun lay low down in the sky. It was just dropping behind Kettle Ness. The red light was thrown over the East Cliff, and the old Abbey seemed to bathe everything in beautiful rosy glow. We were silent for a while, and suddenly Lucy murmured, as if to herself, "His red eyes again. They are just the same." Such an odd expression, coming apropos of nothing, that it quite startled me. I slewed round a little so as to see Lucy, well, without seeming to stare at her, and saw that she was quite in a half-dreamy state, with an odd look on her face that I could not quite make out, so I said nothing but followed her eyes. She appeared to be looking over at our own seat, whereupon was a dark figure seated alone. I was a little startled myself, for it seemed for an instant as if the stranger had great eyes like burning flames, but a second look dispelled the illusion. The red sunlight was shining in the windows of St. Mary's Church beyond the seat, and as the sun clipped there was just sufficient to change the refraction and recollection to make it appear as if the light moved. I called Lucy's attention to the peculiar effect, and she became herself with a start, but she looked sad all the same. It may have been that she was thinking of that terrible night up there. We never referred to it, so I said nothing, and we went home to dinner. Lucy had a headache and went away to bed. I saw her asleep and went out for a little stroll myself. I walked along the cliffs to the west and was full of sweet sadness, for I was thinking of Jonathan. When coming home, it was then bright moonlight, so bright that through the front of our part of the crescent was in shadow. Everything could be well seen. I threw a glance up at our window and saw Lucy's head leaning out. I thought that perhaps she was looking out for me, so I opened my handkerchief and waved it. She did not notice or make any movement whatever. Just then the moonlight crept round an angle of the building, and the light fell on the window. There distinctly was Lucy, with her head lying up against the side of the windowsill, and her eyes shut. She was fast asleep, and by her, seated on the windowsill, there was something that looked like a good-sized bird. I was afraid she might get a chill, so I ran upstairs, but as I came into the room, she was moving back to her bed, fast asleep, and breathing heavily. She was holding her hand to her throat, as though to protect it from cold. I did not wake her, but tucked her up warmly. I've taken care that the door is locked and the windows securely fastened. She looks so sweet as she sleeps, but she is paler than is her wont. There is a drawn, haggard look under her eyes which I do not like. I fear she is fretting about something. I wish I could find out what it is. 15th of August. Rose later than usual. Lucy was languid and tired, and slept on after it had been called. We had a happy surprise at breakfast. Arthur's father is better and wants the marriage to come off soon. Lucy is full of quiet joy, and her mother is glad and sorry at once. Later on in the day she told me the cause. She is grieved to lose Lucy as her very own, but she is rejoiced that she is soon to have someone to protect her. Poor dear sweet lady. She confided to me that she has got her death warrant. She's not told Lucy and made me promise secrecy. Her doctor told her that within a few months at most she must die, for her heart is weakening. At any time, even now, a sudden shock would be almost sure to kill her. Ah, we were wise to keep from her the affair of the dreadful night of Lucy's sleepwalking. 17th of August. No diary for 2 whole days. I have not had the heart to write. Some sort of shadowy pall seems to be coming over our happiness. No news from Jonathan, and Lucy seems to be growing weaker, whilst her mother's hours are numbering to a close. I do not understand Lucy's fading away as she is doing. She eats well, she sleeps well, and enjoys the fresh air. But all the time the roses in her cheeks are fading, and she gets weaker and more languid day by day. At night I hear her gasping as if for air. I keep the key of our door always fastened to my wrist at night, but she gets up and walks around the room and sits at the open window. Last night I found her leaning out when I woke up, and when I tried to wake her I could not. She was in a faint. When I managed to restore her, she was as weak as water and cried silently between long painful struggles for breath. When I asked her how she came to be at the window, she shook her head and turned away. I trust her feeling ill may not be from that unlucky prick of the safety pin. I looked at her throat just now as she lay asleep, and the tiny wounds seem not to have healed. They are still open, and if anything, larger than before. The edges of them are faintly white. They are like little white dots with red centres. Unless they heal within a day or two, I shall insist on the doctor seeing about them. Letter, Samuel F. Billington and Son, Solicitors, Whitby, to Messrs. Carter, Patterson and Co., London, 17th of August. Dear Sirs, herewith please receive invoice of goods sent by Great Northern Railway. Same are to be delivered at Carfax, near Purfleet, immediately on receipt at Goods Station, King's Cross. The house is at present empty, but enclosed please find all keys, all of which are labelled. You will please deposit the boxes, 50 in number, which form the consignment of the partially ruined building forming part of the house and marked A on a rough diagram enclosed. Your agent will easily recognise the locality, as it is the ancient chapel of the mansion. The goods leave by the train at 9:30 tonight and will be due at King's Cross at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. As our client wishes the delivery made as soon as possible, we shall be obliged by your having teams ready at King's Cross at the time named and forthwith conveying the goods to the destination. In order to obviate any delays possible through any routine requirements, payment in your departments, we enclose a cheque herewith of £10, receipt of which please acknowledge. Should the charge be less than this amount, you can return balance. If greater, we shall at once send a cheque for the difference on hearing from you. You are to leave the keys on coming away in the main hall of the house, where the proprietor may get them on his entering the house by means of his duplicate key. Pray do not take us as exceeding the bounds of business courtesy in pressing you in all ways to use the utmost expedition. We are, dear sirs, faithfully yours, Samuel F. Billington and Son. Letter. Messrs. Carter and Patterson Co., London, to Messrs. Billington and Son, Whitby. 21st of August. Dear Sirs, we beg to acknowledge £10 received and return a cheque for £1.17 and 9, amount of overplus as shown in receipted account herewith. Goods are delivered in exact accordance with instructions, and keys left in parcel in main hall as directed. We are, dear sirs, yours respectfully, Pro Carter, Patterson and Co. Mina Murray's Journal. 18th of August. I'm happy today, and writing, sitting on the seat in the churchyard. Lucy is ever so much better. Last night she slept well at night, and did not disturb me once. The roses seem to be coming back into her cheeks, though she is still sadly pale and wan looking. If she were in any way anemic, I could understand it, but she is not. She is in gay spirits and full of life and cheerfulness. All the morbid reticence seems to have passed from her, and she has just reminded me, as if I need any reminding, of that night and that it was here, on this very seat, I found her asleep. As she told me, she tapped playfully with the heel of a boot on the stone slab and said, "My poor little feet didn't make much noise. I dare say that poor old Mr. Swales would have told me that it was because I didn't want to wake up Geordie." As she was in such a communicative humour, I asked her if she had dreamed at all that night. Before she answered, that sweet puckered look came into her forehead, which Arthur, I call him Arthur from her habit, says he loves, and indeed I don't wonder that he does. She went on in a half-dreaming kind of way, as if trying to recall it to herself. I didn't quite dream, but it all seemed to be real. I only wanted it to be here in this spot. I don't know why, for I was afraid of something. I don't know what, I remember, though I suppose I was asleep passing through the streets and over the bridge. A fish leapt as I went by, and I leaned over to look at it, and I heard a lot of dogs howling. The whole town seemed as if it must be full of dogs all howling at once. And I went up the steps. Then I had a vague memory of something long and dark with red eyes, just as we saw in the tunnel, and something very sweet and very bitter all around me at once. And then I seemed sinking into green water, and there was a singing in my ears as I've heard there is to drowning men. And then everything seemed passing away from me. My soul seemed to go out from my body and float around in the air. I seem to remember that once the West Lighthouse was right under me. There was a sort of agonising feeling as if I were in an earthquake, and I came back and found you shaking my body. I saw you do it before I felt you. She began to laugh. It seemed a little uncanny to me, and I listened to her breathlessly. I did not quite like it, and I thought it better not to keep her mind on the subject. So we drifted on to other subjects, and Lucy was like her old self again. When we got home, the fresh breeze had braced her up, and her pale cheeks were really more rosy. Her mother rejoiced when she saw her, and we all spent a very happy evening together. 19th August. Joy, joy, joy. No, not all joy, at last news of Jonathan. The dear fellow has been ill, and that's why he did not write. I am not afraid to think or say it now that I know. Mr. Hawkins sent me on the letter, and wrote himself, oh so kindly. I am to leave in the morning and go over to Jonathan, and to help to nurse him if necessary, and bring him home. Mr. Hawkins says it would not be a bad thing if we were to be married out there. I have cried over the good sister's letters until I can feel it wet against my bosom, where it lies. It is of Jonathan, and must be next my heart, for he is in my heart. My journey is all mapped out, and my luggage ready. I am only taking one change of dress. Lucy will bring my trunk to London, and keep it till I send for it. For it may be that I must write no more. I must keep it to say to Jonathan, my husband. The letter that he has seen and touched must comfort me till we meet. Letter, Sister Agatha, Hospital of St. Joseph and St. Mary, Budapest, to Miss Wilhelmina Murray, 12th of August. Dear Madam, I write by desire of Mr. Jonathan Harker, who is himself not strong enough to write, although progressing well, thanks to God and St. Joseph and St. Mary. He has been under our care for near 6 weeks, suffering from a violent brain fever. He wishes me to convey his love and to say that by this post I write for him to Mr. Peter Hawkins, Exeter, to say with all his dutiful respects that he is sorry for his delay and that all of his work is completed. He will require some few weeks' rest in our sanitarium in the hills, but will then return. He wishes me to say that he has not sufficient money with him, and that he would like to pay for his staying here, so that others who need shall not be wanting for help. Believe me, yours with sympathy and all blessings, Sister Agatha. P.S. My patient being asleep, I open this to let you know something more. He has told me about you and that you are shortly to be his wife. All blessings to you both. He has had some fearful shocks, so says our doctor, and his delirium, his ravings have been dreadful, of wolves and poison, of blood, of ghosts and demons, and I fear to say that be careful with him. And I fear to say of what? Be careful with him always, that there may be nothing to excite him of this kind for a long time to come. The traces of such an illness do not lightly die away. We should have written long ago, but we knew nothing of his friends, and there was on him nothing that anyone could understand. He came in the train from Klausenberg, and the guard was told by the station master that he rushed into the station shouting for a ticket for home. Seeming from his violent demeanour that he was English, they gave him a ticket for the furthest station on the way thither that the train reached. Be assured he is well cared for. He has won all our hearts by his sweetness and gentleness. He is truly getting on well, and I have no doubt will in a few weeks be all himself. But be careful of him for safety's sake. There are, I pray God and St. Joseph and St. Mary, many, many happy years for you both. Dr. Seward's Diary, 19th of August. Strange and sudden change in Renfield last night. About 8 o'clock he began to get excited and sniff about, as a dog does when setting. The attendant was struck by his manner, and knowing my interest in him, encouraged him to talk. He is usually respectful to the attendant, and at times servile. But tonight the man tells me he was quite haughty, would not condescend to talk with him at all. All he would say was, "I don't want to talk to you, you don't count now, the master is at hand." The attendant thinks it's some sudden form of religious mania which has seized him. If so, we must look out for squalls, for a strong man with a homicidal and religious mania at once might be dangerous. The combination is a dreadful one. At 9 o'clock I visited him myself. His attitude to me was the same as that to the attendant. In his sublime self-feeling, the difference between myself and the attendant seemed to him as nothing. It looks like a religious mania, and he will soon think that he himself is God. These infinitesimal distinctions between man and man are too paltry for an omnipotent being. How these madmen give themselves away! The real God taketh heed lest a sparrow fall. But the God created from human vanity sees no difference between an eagle and a sparrow. Oh, if men only knew! For half an hour or more, Renfield kept getting excited in a greater and greater degree. I did not pretend to be watching him, but I kept strict observation all the same. All at once that shifty look came into his eyes, which we always see when a madman has seized an idea, and with it the shifty movement of the head and back, which asylum attendants come to know so well. He became quite quiet and went and sat on the edge of his bed resignedly, and looked into space with lacklustre eyes. I thought I would find out if his apathy were real or only assumed, and tried to lead him to talk of his pets, a theme which had never failed to excite his attention. First he made no reply, but at length said, testily, "Bother them all, I don't care a pin about them." "What?" I said. "You don't mean to tell me you don't care about spiders?" Spiders are at present his hobby, and the notebook is filling up with columns of small figures. To this he answered enigmatically, "The bride maidens rejoice the eyes that wait the coming of the bride, but when the bride draweth nigh, then the maidens shine not to the eyes that are filled." He would not explain himself, but remained obstinately seated on his bed all the time I remained with him. I am weary tonight and low in spirits. I cannot but think of Lucy and how different things might have been. If I don't sleep at once, chloral, the modern Morpheus, C2HC130.H20, must be careful not to let it grow into a habit, nor shall I take none tonight. I have thought of Lucy, and I shall not dishonour her by mixing the two. If need be, tonight shall be sleepless. Later. Glad I made the resolution, gladder that I kept to it. I had lain tossing about and had heard the clock strike only once, when the night watchman came to me, sent up from my ward, to say that Renfield had escaped. I threw on my clothes, ran down at once. My patient is too dangerous a person to be roaming about. Those ideas of his might work out dangerously with strangers. The attendant was waiting for me. He said he had seen him not 10 minutes before, seemingly asleep in his bed, when he had threw the observation trap in the door. His attention was called by the sound of the window being wrenched out. He ran back and saw his feet disappear through the window, and had at once sent up for me. He was only in his night gear and cannot be far off. The attendant thought it would be more useful to watch where he should go than to follow him, as he might lose sight of him whilst getting out of the building by the door. He is a bulky man and couldn't get through the window. I am thin, so with his aid I got out, but feet foremost, and, as we were only a few feet above ground, landed unhurt. The attendant told me the patient had gone to the left and had taken a straight line, so I ran as quickly as I could. As I got through the belt of trees, I saw a white figure scale the high wall which separates our grounds from those of the deserted house. I ran back at once and told the watchman to get 3 or 4 men immediately and follow me into the grounds of Carfax. In our case, our friend might be dangerous. I got a ladder myself and, crossing the wall, dropped down on the other side. I could see Renfield's figure just disappearing behind the angle of the house, so I ran after him. On the far side of the house I found him pressed close against the old iron-bound oak door of the chapel. He was talking apparently to someone, but I was afraid to go near enough to hear what he was saying, lest I might frighten him and he should run off. Chasing an errant swarm of bees is nothing to following a naked lunatic when the fit of escaping is upon him. After a few minutes, however, I could see that he did not take note of anything around him, and so ventured to draw near to him, the more so as my men had now crossed the wall and were closing him in. "I am here to do your bidding, master. I am your slave, and you will reward me, for I shall be faithful. I have worshipped you long and far off, but now you are near, I await your commands. And you will not pass me by, will you, dear master, in your distribution of good things? He is a selfish old beggar anyhow. He thinks of the loaves and fishes even when he believes he is a real presence. His manias make a startling combination. When we closed in on him, he fought like a tiger. He is immensely strong, for he was more like a wild beast than a man. I never saw a lunatic in such a paroxysm of rage before, and hope I shall not again. It is a mercy that we have found out his strength and his danger in good time. With strength and determination like his, he might have done wild work before he was caged. He is safe now at any rate. Jack Shepherd himself couldn't get free from the straight waistcoat that keeps him restrained, and he's chained to the wall in the padded room. His cries at times are awful, but the silences that follow are more deadly still, for he means murder in every turn and movement. Just now he spoke coherent words for the first time. "I shall be patient, master. It is coming, coming, coming." So I took the hint and came to. I was too excited to sleep, but this diary has quieted me, and I feel I shall get some sleep tonight. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of Dracula by Bram Stoker. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. A letter. Mina Harker to Lucy Westenra. Budapest, 24th of August. My dearest Lucy, I know you will be anxious to hear all that has happened since we parted at the railway station at Whitby. Well, my dear, I got to Hull all right and caught the boat to Hamburg and then the train on here. I feel that I can hardly recall anything of the journey, except that I knew I was coming to Jonathan, but as I should have to do some nursing, I'd better get all the sleep I could. I found my dear one, oh so thin and pale and weak looking. All the resolution had gone out of his dear eyes, and that quiet dignity which I told you was in his face has vanished. He's only a wreck of himself. He does not remember anything that has happened to him for a long time past. At least he wants me to believe so. And I shall never ask. He has had some terrible shock, and I fear it might tax his poor brain if he were to try to recall it. Sister Agatha, who is a good creature and a born nurse, tells me that he raved of dreadful things while he was off his head. But she would only cross herself and say she would never tell, that the raving of the sick were the secrets of God, and if a nurse through her vocation should hear them, she should respect her trust. She is a sweet, good soul, and the next day when she saw I was troubled, she opened up on the subject again, and after saying that she should never mention what my poor dear raved about, I can tell you this much, my dear. It was not about anything which he has done wrong himself, and you, as his wife-to-be, have no cause to be concerned. He has not forgotten you or what he owes to you. His fear was of a great and terrible things, which no mortal can treat of. I do believe the dear soul thought I might be jealous, lest my poor dear should have fallen in love with any other girl. The idea of my being jealous about Jonathan, and yet, my dear, let me whisper, I felt a thrill of joy through me when I knew that no other woman was a cause of trouble. I am now sitting by his bedside, where I can see his face while he sleeps. He is waking. When he woke, he asked me for his coat as he wanted to get something from the pocket. I asked Sister Agatha, and she brought all his things. I saw that amongst them was his notebook, and was going to ask him to let me look at it, for I knew then I might find some clue to his trouble. But I supposed he must have seen my wish in my eyes, for he sent me over to the window saying he wanted to be quite alone for a moment. Then he called me back, and when I came he had his hand over the notebook, and he said to me very solemnly, "Wilhelmina, I knew then that he was in deadly earnest, for he has never called me by that name since he asked me to marry him. You know, my dear, my ideas of the trust between husband and wife. There should be no secret, no concealment. I have had a great shock, and when I try to think of what it is I feel, my head spins round. I do not know if it was all real